Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Monk Chat. Oh, it looks like we're off to a start with just a few friends here tonight to get us started. That's just fine. Welcome to Gita and another viewer who hasn't signed in yet. Monk Chat is our Friday evening program here at Temple Forest Monastery, where things are a little bit more informal. There's no formal meditation period, though I may, since it's just going to be one monk tonight, I may switch things up a little bit and try a few variations on the usual format. So please feel free to go ahead and start typing questions in at any point. As you may know, the rest of the community here at Empty Cloud is on retreat, a silent retreat, through the weekend, and I am, well, I won't say manning, but monking the live streams that we offer. It's a great honor and privilege to do that. We now have enough people in the chat room that I'm not sure that everyone knows me. My name is Santi. You can call me Tan Santi. I am a visiting monk from Temple Forest Monastery in New Hampshire. I am delighted to be spending a kind of open-ended bunch of time here at Empty Cloud. My training thus far, before coming to Empty Cloud, has been in the Thai forest tradition of Theravada Buddhism. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to field them. I was interested in, intrigued by, and drawn to Empty Cloud, well, for a number of reasons, but one of them is that the abbots have made it part of their mission to bring a wide variety of monastics through Empty Cloud to connect with Dhamma seekers in the world like yourself, monastic teachers from the whole range, across the whole spectrum of Buddhist traditions. Okay, so we've got Elaine, welcome. Gita. And I think that Gita may be starting us off with a question. I think you might be asking for the name of the book I gave this morning on Jannah meditation. I'm going to type it right into the chat so that you can copy it down more easily. It's called Samadhi. Oh, okay. Well, I'll put it in there anyway since I got started. It's Pure Enjoyment by Ajahn Sucitto. Okay. So I wonder if you found that book. It's available online. The Forest Sangha, as the website is known, of the Thai forest monasteries in the Western world, has a very, very extensive free online collection available to the public. Great. Okay, so I don't see any questions yet. Please type them in on the fly. I think I'm going to start off just by giving you a very short 5-minute or less rundown on something I've mentioned a few times this week in the course of the many live streams that I've personally delivered. I think I might have done this partially during one of the live streams, but I would like to do it a little bit more exhaustively, and that is to talk about the topic that has brought us all here, the topic of the Dhamma. I mentioned in a number of my talks, without really going into it, that the word Dhamma, as it's used in the suttas of the Pali Canon, the ancient scriptures through which and by which the teachings of the Buddha have come down to us, I've mentioned that the word Dhamma has many meanings, and that the Pali language in general is a more poetic language, so that sometimes more than one meaning is indicated, or sometimes the word that's used in its many meanings is a little bit ambiguous as to which or even how many of the meanings are involved. So while our gathering audience is thinking about what you would like to talk about this evening, because that's kind of what Monk Chat is about. It's your questions, and we put it together more as a conversation than as a kind of one-way teaching like a Dhamma talk. So as you're thinking about what's on your mind this evening, I'm just going to mention some of the meanings of the word Dhamma that I've come across in my studies of the suttas. Of course, the Dhamma sometimes refers to the suttas themselves, the teachings of the Buddha and the great disciples as recorded in the Pali Canon. Dhamma also means the actual teachings that the Buddha said. These are not necessarily identical. If you've listened to my Dhamma talks this week, you'll understand why I think that. The Dhamma also refers to the truth that those words, those teachings are pointing to. And that's a very important meaning, maybe the central meaning that the others all flow from, the truth that the teachings are pointing to. But Dhamma also means nature and the nature of things. That's a very important meaning. You can sometimes just plug the word nature right in and it makes lots of sense. And specifically, I'll add one more meaning. Dhamma also can mean simply the things of nature, natural phenomena. But I'm using the word phenomena intentionally because the concept of natural phenomena reflected in the suttas is a little bit different than the way we might use the word. It doesn't necessarily mean the actual things out there in the world, whatever that means. The suttas don't make a clear distinction between what we experience and some kind of objective reality. That's not really a topic in the suttas. So really, the Dhamma, in this sense, is just what we experience. Everything that we experience is Dhamma. And sometimes one specialized use is it's the stuff in our minds. Dhamma are dhammas, if we want to take it as a plural, are things in our mind, thoughts, feelings, ideas. So feel free to ask questions about Dhamma in any and all of those senses. That is my big topic. Okay, so now we've got some questions coming in. Hello to Danilo and Liz, Gita, Elaine, and a bunch of people who haven't logged in yet. Okay, so Gita asked a question. Bhante, can you speak a bit about stillness? What a beautiful question. Stillness is a topic that in the course of worldly life doesn't make its way to the center of conversation very much, does it? Stillness is really worth paying attention to, though. Gita has clearly content to this. I commend it as a topic for everyone who's come here tonight. Stillness is a quality that inheres in every moment of experience. I invite you to check that out for yourself. Can you find the sense of stillness in anything? Some things it's really easy to see it. Take a look over at the object to your right off screen that your vision happens to land upon. You can see that, oh, okay, it's still in the simplest sense of the word. As my mind constructs reality, the meditation bell does not move. It's just sitting there all on its own. Okay, so you know what stillness is. Our reference for it comes from our lived practical sensory experience. But now try to look for stillness in things that seem to be moving. Try to look for stillness in your own being, in your body, in your heart, and in your mind. And you'll find it. You'll find it everywhere you look. If you have any follow-up questions, Gita, you're welcome to ask them. I see a couple other questions have come in, and I will turn to them now. Okay, Danilo asks, would it be possible to come to the monastery for a week between December 23rd and 30th? I don't have much in money to offer, but I could bake some bread and pastries. Should I email about this? Let me take this question first. I see you're asking another one, which is more of a general question. I'm very sorry, but unfortunately, because of COVID restrictions, we're limiting visitors to long-term stays at this point, because we're asking people to go through quarantines and tests. Depending on the situation, it's varying. I think that right now the minimum stay is a month. And because we have winter retreat, in effect, right now, it's really like you'd have to express an interest in staying for the entire winter retreat, which would mean about 2.5 months starting now. We'll be on a long-term silent closed winter retreat, January and February. I believe there might still be room for another a couple more members of a retreat team. I'm not 100% sure of that, but you would have to be committed for a longer term stay. On the order of a couple of months rather than a week. It wouldn't matter how much money you have to offer. The dana in monastic life and in monastic tradition is free. It's for everyone. We do not handle money. We don't directly accept money. We have lay stewards and a foundation that can accept. I don't know if it's legally a foundation, but we have a kind of mechanism where if people want to support the monastery, they can do so. But it's really not a money economy that we're on. Food offerings are absolutely welcome. You can always bake bread and pastries for us, but that's a free will offering on your part. There's no exchange, no quid pro quo. Okay, and then you ask also, Danilo, is there any way that you could explain in which way should one contemplate the phenomena that arise during meditation? Oh, sure. That is right on topic for the kind of things I like to talk about. In what way should one contemplate the phenomena that arise during meditation? Well, you can do no worse than to start from what are called the Satipatthana meditations, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You can notice any phenomenon that arises as being in one of these 4 categories, one of these 4 flavors, if you will, of awareness. You use the term contemplate. Contemplate can range anywhere in meditation from noticing, simply being aware in the most simple, basic sense, to a kind of slow, patient feeling reflection. If any of you have come to the evening Dhamma talks that I gave this week, we did some contemplative meditation, some meditation involving patient, quiet thinking during each of those guided meditations, I think. But for the most part, nowadays, in meditation circles, it's the former, it's the noticing, the bringing the mind to notice what arises in the mind. And you ask the question, you can ask a follow-up. I don't know if you're thinking about any particular kind of phenomena that comes up in your meditation in particular. Feel free to ask about that. In general, you've got these 4 kind of categories of meditation that are laid out for us in the sutta, the mindfulness meditation sutta, the Satipatthana Sutta. They are, you can meditate on the body. In a seated meditation, typically that'll mean with your eyes closed, and you're noticing the breath in the body, the sensations in the body. You can meditate on the the feeling of those sensations. You can try to tease those two things apart. What part of what you're noticing is feeling, and which part is just plain sensation? The second satipatthana, the second foundation of mindfulness, feeling, in Pali, the word is Vedana, is given as the good and bad feeling that you can sense in subtly or strongly in any sensation. For example, a painful sensation in your knees while you're sitting there, that would be a sensation of kind of maybe squeezing or twisting or pressure, and then a feeling of discomfort, negative. Or you might feel something quite mysterious and like maybe a feeling of like very, very subtle sensation of air passing over the upper lip as it flows into your body, and that might be a pleasant sensation. But you take the perspective of just noticing it, not getting tangled up in it, not trying to get anything from it, not feeling bad about it. If you do have a reaction to it, notice that. That is a phenomenon as well. That would be a phenomenon in the category of the fourth foundation mindfulness, which is mindfulness of mental phenomena, mental arisings. This is that last meaning of Dhamma that I talked about, Dhammas. Ideas, memories, imaginings, the kind of thing that in the beginning, sometimes we're taught as meditators are distractions. But actually, you can make those into your meditation object. The way to do that is simply to notice them when they arise. Notice them. As soon as you've noticed them, you're once again practicing, and you can return to whatever meditation object you set out to train on. I skipped over the third meditation object. That's a pretty subtle one, but a very profound and important one. That's meditation on the state of mind, your state of mind, the level of consciousness, the quality of your consciousness. Is your mind contracted within a particular sphere of like imagining? Are you lost in some thought world? Or are you experiencing a more expansive mind in which you're aware of your present being? I think that moods fall in this category. Are you able to see the mood that you're in? Okay, so there's a few comments. Please feel free to ask any follow-up questions. Let me continue on because I see other questions and comments. Comments are very welcome here, have also come in. Let's see. Gita has said, acts or deeds occur according to the conditions at the time. Indeed. This and non-self are in the teachings. Correct. Kama and anatta. How can these be conciliated with responsibility to one's actions? This is a classic question. The teaching on not self can be misunderstood to mean that your sense of being an individual being is an illusion. That's not my understanding of the teaching on not self. You're still a person, you're still an individual, you're still responsible. You're just not a fixed, permanent, unchanging entity. You're a flow. A flow can be responsible just as much as a fixed, unchanging, permanent entity. There's a lot more to the doctrine of not self. A lot of it is, it's not all relevant all at the same time. It depends where you are in your practice. And it's easy to get caught up in the kind of theoretics of it. It's more something to explore in your own lived experience. Anyway, my sense is that an awareness of not self deepens and gives more meaning to the nature of our responsibility to others. Because once we let go of that self-other relationship, once we start thinking about how our responsibility is going to affect us, how hard is it going to be, or what am I going to get out of it for myself, or I have to pay this person back. Once we let go of ourselves, that no longer offer, those kind of considerations no longer offer the motivations for our acts and deeds, for our skillful acts and deeds. Instead, we find a sense of motivation in our compassion and our concern for the people that we're responsible to. If you're responsible for your mother's well-being and she's aging and she needs your practical support, she needs you to take her to the doctor, to cook for her. When you get past that sense of self, you're not doing it out of a sense of obligation. You're doing it because she means as much to you as you do. All right, I'll leave. I think that point is clear enough. Please ask any follow-up questions. Elaine says, it is good to see you smile. Well, you must be talking about me. Because I'm the only one whose picture is getting shown right now. Maybe we'll switch to Zoom sometime so we can see each other smile. But I'm not involved in the technology choices yet here at the monastery. I hope you're smiling too. It's nice to imagine it. Liz says, knowing what you know now, would you have changed your focus in your practice? Were there any experiences that redirected your focus? Well, I'd like to comment on each of the clauses in your question. First is knowing what you know now. Okay, sure, I know some things. I learned many things in my life before becoming a monk, and I've learned some things since becoming a monk. But I would just like to quickly comment on what I think is the value of dialogue between monks and upasikas and upasikas, namely lay followers, as it's sometimes translated. I like the Pali word because the literal meaning is quite beautiful. It means those who adhere, those who stick close by the Dhamma. Anyway, the dialogue between monastics and lay followers, to me, it's not of value because monks have some particular, like all monks have some particular spiritual attainment. Of course, some do. To me, the value is that monks have a kind of different perspective. The perspective of one who has formally committed one's life to the way of the samanas, to the way of renunciation. Having made that choice and pursuing that life, it just offers a different perspective. So what I have to share isn't some particular knowledge necessarily. It's a perspective, and the perspective is one that's a little bit different than the perspective of many walks of worldly life. It's also a perspective that anyone can learn. You don't have to take a vow or go through an ordination ceremony in order to adopt that perspective. And you can lose the perspective even if you're living as a monk. But the inheritance that the Buddha left for us of the monastic tradition is a really, really good way to cultivate that perspective. So yeah, I think that it's a valuable thing to have this kind of dialogue. As for what I know, yeah, I've done a lot of meditation, so I will share a thought or two. Would I have changed my focus in your practice? Well, would I? I couldn't. I only knew what I knew at the time. So in a way, that kind of hypothetical question is itself kind of a tying of the mind into a knot. I would offer some encouragement, though, that might help with that question. Would I have changed my focus? I think I'll just go to the last part, and that'll tell you how I might have changed my focus. I'll mention an experience that I've just been reflecting on recently that really helped me to find a sense of ease in my practice. And it occurred to me, it was really just a very simple realization that came to me while I was meditating. And I'd been kind of struggling, having a hard time the way many of us do in meditation. I don't know if I was bored or just kind of agitated. I didn't want to settle down, but I'd kind of committed to myself to sit. I was in my cabin at the monastery I was staying at, Temple Forest Monastery in New Hampshire. And this question just came into my mind. Why is meditation difficult? It was immediately followed by the thought, it shouldn't be difficult. Why should it be difficult? I'm just sitting here with my eyes closed. What could be easier than that? And then I thought, well, it's difficult because it feels like what's happening, what's coming into my mind feels painful. And somehow those two thoughts added up to the realization that, well, I'm really just sitting here. It doesn't have to be difficult. What can I do about this sense of it being difficult? And somehow with having those questions in front of me, the pieces fell into place, and I understood a teaching that I'd been reading many times from Ajahn Chah, the kind of founder of my lineage, the lineage that I was trained in which he says, wherever you're suffering, that's where you work. And I immediately, or in that moment, I understood, oh, this is what he's talking about. If I feel agitated, the thing to do is not to react and run with the badness of that feeling. It's to just look at it, know the agitation and observe what happens. Or if I'm feeling impatient or bored or stuck, investigate that, look at it, see what it feels like. Don't cling to the yearning in the mind to have some kind of perfect meditation experience. It's a little bit of a paradox, because what you'll discover is that investigation is more pleasant than where your mind would have gone if you'd stuck with the urge to get meditating properly. So yeah, there's a few thoughts on how you can shift your focus. I hope that'll be helpful for you. I can promise you that meditation does not have to be difficult. I can promise you that over time it will become, it will deepen your sense of peace. It'll put you in touch with your perspective, with your sense of balance and the still heart of things. Oh, a bunch of other questions have come in. Let's turn to those. Liz follows up, will there still be online talks during the winter retreat? Yes. All of the monastics will take turns. Each of the monastics will take turns, the way I did this week, in continuing our usual program of live streams. Elaine asks, Venerable Sir, do you know anything about Amitabha Buddha? If so, could you comment, please? Thank you. I only know secondhand from reading about Pure Land Buddhism. I don't know enough to really comment authoritatively, and everything in my training says not to comment in any kind of judgmental way. One monk, a Theravadan monk who I respect very much, says that it shared with me his impression that the underlying teachings of Pure Land Buddhism, if you really delve into it, although the kind of popular framing sounds very different from Theravadan Buddhism, that the underlying structure of it, the kind of, I don't want to say philosophy, but the sort of theory that lies under it is really the same. That it's quite true to the original teachings, the core teachings of the Buddha as they're understood in the Theravadan world. The popular framing is that the Buddha can provide a kind of intercession, that in meditation we can commune with the actual Parinibbana Buddha Amitabha. I don't know much about it. I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom in that tradition. So maybe I'll stop there. And I'll move on to the next question. Gita asks, or says, Bhante, we have heard Bhikkhu Bodhi describe the mind state of Nibbana to be the unconditioned, the unborn, a state in the middle, a profound state of peace. What are your thoughts on Nibbana? I'm glad you came back to this question, Gita. I wasn't able to answer the other night in the flow of the talk I was giving, and then having run over time, we didn't come back to it. Also, I hadn't really laid the ground to answer it very well for you, to share my thoughts very clearly. I think that you've come to some of the other talks, though, and so maybe I'll reference them a little bit in sharing some of my thoughts. My thought is that all of the synonyms that we get for Nibbana are referring to the same thing: liberation, freedom, enlightenment, stillness, peace. My monastic name is an epithet for the Buddha. Santi, is an epithet for enlightenment. That all of these terms are similes or metaphors pointing to an unnameable reality, an unnameable truth. As I noted during one of my talks this week, those two words, truth and reality, are actually one concept, or at least one word, referred to by one word in Pali, in the original language of the suttas. Satchang, Satcha. So what is this one reality that all of these words are pointing to? Well, we can know it partly by its opposite. Its opposite is samsara, the round of desire, the round of the world, the round of our ordinary experience of everything being in motion. This kind of comes back to Liz's question. Danilo's question earlier. I'm sorry, I don't remember who asked about stillness. Anyway. Maybe it was you, Gita. I won't do a text search now. So our minds are just constantly roving, constantly moving around towards or away from whatever the current object of desire or aversion is. If our bodies are not moving, if we're not following some scheme of grasping or pushing away, our minds are busily at it, filling in the gaps. This is samsara. The teaching of Nibbana is that we can be free of all the suffering that follows from that constant motion, that constant effort to get or to push away, to grasp or to push away. We can be free of it. We can be free of the disappointment of losing what we've gotten. We can be free of the itchy wanting of what we don't have. We can be free of the urge to get away from what we don't like. Get away from what we don't like. What would that mean? Well, if the round of samsara is a kind of movement, it literally means the wandering, then its freedom from it is a kind of stillness. In using the simile nibbana, think that the value is in the meaning of cooling. Nibbana means literally cooling. I'm told that in India, people still use the word nibbana to refer to like a pot cooling off. Then the rice is nibbana, it's cooling. I don't know the grammar, sorry if I'm mangling it. I actually don't even know if that's true. But the word refers to a calming down, a cooling specifically of what's sometimes translated the passions of desire. I guess the original thought that I would have to add to this notion of nibbana, you may have heard that before, that nibbana is the cooling of the passions. I think it's important to think about the English word passion. That word is very, very similar in its connotations to the words in Pali, to raga. Another synonym for nibbana is dispassion. You sometimes see it with a capital D. Nibbana, enlightenment, dispassion. Passion is not just desire. Desire is actually a very neutral word, and it doesn't have a good correspondent in Pali. There is no Pali word for desire with its very neutral tone. There are wholesome and healthy desires and unwholesome, negative desires. The word desire covers a wide range of meanings, but passion is a good translation of what Nibbana gets us away from. The cooling of the passions refers to the strong ones, the ones that we get lost in. And it's that getting lost that meditation teaches us to save ourselves from. It teaches us to not get caught up in our passions to the point that we become heedless. And that is the first toehold in Nibbana. Okay, there's a bunch of other questions that have come in. I could say more, but Gita, please feel free to ask any follow-ups. It's nice to have more of a conversation. Bhavani says, Namaste. Namaste to you as well. How to know the mind? How to know the nature of mind? Well, your name is very similar to the practice that the Buddha taught us to take up in order to find the answer to your question. I don't know if it's related. I'd be curious to know if the name Bhavani is related to the word bhavana, which means development of the mind. There's the answer to your question. We learn to know, we know the mind by developing the mind. You can come to know the mind by developing the mind. And how do you develop the mind? Following the Buddhist path is a great way. It's not the only way. It's the way that works for me and that's worked for many, many others. So I recommend it highly. One of the simplest expressions of the path that the Buddha laid out is given in just 3 steps: sila, samadhi, panya. Sila is developing restraint, ethical conduct, ethical speech, and ultimately a kind of restraint of thought that gives you a foundation of integrity. It's a training of your character, and its goal is a kind of personal integrity that provides a foundation of stability for samadhi, for bhavana, training of the mind. With a foundation of integrity, the mind can learn non-distraction, can learn a kind of oneness that makes it into a very, very powerful tool of investigation, to see beyond the concerns of desire, to see beyond the goals but beyond your desires and aversions. Literally, to see desire and aversion as desire and aversion. Once you've got that little trick, the investigation opens up wide. So I recommend meditation. These are not like sequential steps. You can do both at the same time. Sometimes practicing meditation kind of shows you, is what alerts you to the recognition that, oh, I also need to work on sila, on my restraint and ethical conduct. And that opens the door. The dynamic of developing those two together opens the door to the dynamic of wisdom. And the content of wisdom is just what you're asking for. It's the knowing of the true nature of mind, of your awareness. So there's a question to take with you every step of the way. What is this awareness? Like, what is this? What is going on here? There's this experience. Who's seeing it? What is seeing it? What is its nature? That it that I'm talking about isn't just a bunch of stuff happening in the dark. It's being known. What is this knowing? Okay, so I hope I'm helping you narrow the question, to focus on the kind of question you're asking, and maybe how to take the steps towards searching for the answer yourself. I don't know if you were here from the beginning. There's a whole trove of books that helped me to develop the perspective I just shared. If you thought it was a valuable perspective, you can delve into that perspective by investigating the books of the the Forest Sangha, at the Forest Sangha website, the Forest Sangha of the Thai forest tradition. A little bit of Google searching will lead you directly to that. Or Dhamma books from any tradition. The traditions of Theravada are the ones that I'm familiar with, from Sri Lanka, from Thailand, from Burma. There are many different valuable perspectives in the Dhamma. Typically, one is most curious about ideas about the Dhamma, which can be very helpful, more at the beginning of the path. But for some of us who are of a more kind of intellectual bent or a verbal bent, you're going to just keep reading them all the way through. But yeah, spend some time meditating. Spend some time putting the books down and just looking for yourself into the heart. And looking in your daily life from the perspective that you learn at your actions and how they affect things around you. Okay, so moving along. Elaine reassures us that she is indeed smiling. I hope some other people are too. That's great, Elaine. Thank you. BDW, could you explain a bit about non-self or unaccumulated self? Oh, I haven't heard that phrase. From your own understanding. What is the Pali sort of non-self as found in the canon? That's a great question. I think you might have tuned in after a brief answer that I gave before. It's a really central topic. The Buddha, in the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha pointed to, in different ways, in many different ways, to three marks, three qualities of experience that we often turn away from, that we don't want to see because they challenge our sense of a self. Maybe to answer your question, I'll mention what those marks are and why we don't want to see them. One is the mark of things being impermanent, transitory, or in their kind of emotional, affective aspect, imperfect, flawed. One way to think about their impermanence is that they don't last forever. And in the realm of suffering, what that comes down to is if there's something that you want, even if you get it, it's going to change. Even just the feeling of having it, even if you get to keep it, the feeling of having it is going to change. It's going to feel great when you first get it, but before long, that feeling will fade. And viewed with the maybe greed is too strong a word, but viewed with desire, there might be some sense of suffering because the feeling has changed. We don't want to see that. And so we like to think that, oh, if I just get that thing I want, I'm going to be happy. And the unstated kind of parentheses after the word happy in the heart is forever. It's going to be permanent. I already talked a little bit about the second mark, which is suffering. There is suffering in the sense that I just mentioned, even with getting the things that we want. The other forms of suffering are pretty obvious. We get what we don't want, and we don't like that. We don't like that because we're afraid it's going to be permanent, partly. In any case, I probably don't have to say much to convince you of the reality of suffering. But the third part of it is really key, and this is what you're asking about, that things are anatta, that things are without inherent self. Well, so you're asking about non-self. So, and you use an interesting word, unaccumulated. I'm not sure exactly where that comes from or what it's referring to, but it's very evocative. I'll just briefly repeat what I said a little bit earlier at the beginning of tonight's gathering, which is that there are traditionally understood to be three flavors of what you're calling, well, what you would be calling accumulated self. Three flavors really of feeling that constitute the sense of, the incorrect sense of a permanent self, that can just be happy because it is securely grasping its objects of desire. And these three flavors are the feeling of possession of some thing or some person or even some feeling, any kind of acquisition or possession. The feeling that you get of possessing creates that false sense of self. The feeling of identification, of becoming someone in a particular condition, becoming someone angry. We have the feeling, I am angry, and that I is an inherent part of the feeling. Part of what makes it the anger so strong is the palpable sense of its reality, that the I is something real to be angry. And then finally, along with possession and identification, what's the third mark? I'm totally blanking here. Someone can type it in for me. Possession, identification, and it's right at the tip of my tongue. It'll come back. Let's start with those two, and imagine, what if you could separate from those feelings? What if you could not just absorb into the feeling of possession and identification? Let's see, they're referred to as, this is mine, this is not mine, or this is mine, I am this, this is not myself. Wow, I'm really blinking here. Time for a sip of tea. Anyway, what if you could let go of those feelings? By seeing them, by investigating the mind, as Bhavani asked us. When those feelings arise, catch yourself becoming angry. Can you notice the moment when the feeling began? And can you see, what is it made out of? Where is it registering? Are there feelings in the body that are connected with it? Are there typical characteristic thoughts that arise as the feeling comes in, as the emotion takes shape? There's a pattern here. What is the nature of the pattern of responses in my body, in my heart, in my mind? That is a path to letting go of what you might very well call the accumulated self. I'm going to stop there until the third of the absolutely fundamental marks of existence occurs to me, and then I'll share it with you. Okay. I was Gita asking about stillness. I thought so. And then Danilo says, during meditation, I see some thoughts come up, and my friends have told me to identify the hindrances in them. So far, I have identified that most of the thoughts are a form of restlessness and worry. Well, certainly we have different temperaments. Some people tend more towards one of the so-called hindrances, and other people tend towards others. There's many different hindrances. It's really just a synonym for any state that any kind of defilement, any negative state that leads us away from the path, that's not wholesome for us. Interesting question is, are all thoughts hindrances? It really depends how you use the word thought. There are thoughts that come up in meditation that are thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future. These are often kind of like VR thoughts, virtual reality kind of thoughts, where it's not just an idea, it's not just like some pure a word, some voiceless words expressing some meaning. It's an actual kind of phantom experience, like a daydream of something that happened to you, or something that you're imagining might happen or could have happened differently or you hope will happen. It's a kind of drama that plays out in the mind. And many of us will use the term thought to refer to those. Those ones are great for the kind of inquiry that you're talking about. Noticing when you're falling into that kind of thought and seeing what is at the root of it. A very profound teaching of the Buddha that was very important for me is, it's very short. It's that all dhammas, meaning mental phenomena, all dhammas, all kinds of thought are rooted in desire. If you're having some kind of memory of the past or imagining of the future, take a look and see what is the desire that it's rooted in. The desire will have the flavor of one of the hindrances, very likely. Even if it's not one of the classic hindrances, you'll find that the desire is rooted in some feeling that is distracting you from the present. See if you can just see it and feel it without judgment. See what happens to the thought as you do. And see what happens next. And watch that. Restlessness and worry are very common in meditation, not necessarily reflecting anything about the meditator's character or temperament, but simply because you're asking your being to do something very, very counter to the usual flow of samsara. You're asking it to sit still, to be still. And there are parts of your psyche that don't like that. There are parts of you that have other ideas about what you ought to do. And they're going to be lobbying, as it were. They're going to be trying to get you to do something else. And so there's going to be restlessness and worry. So watch that. That's how you respond to it. Know the restlessness and worry at the feeling level. Investigate them. Is there any actual physical movement that you can feel anywhere in your body? Does it feel like it might be connected to the felt sense of restlessness and agitation? It is part of it, absolutely. Those feelings in the body. And then again, what are the thoughts that are connected with it? Am I actually at some subtle level, with or without words, saying, I gotta get out of here. When is this gonna be over? See if you can track down in your awareness, in your conscious knowing, those voices. What do they feel like? Are they palpable to you in some way? Can you feel them? Okay, so there's a few thoughts to share in that question. Let me move onward. Danielle asked a follow-up question. What should I do in order to generate dispassion towards it? Not to repeat myself endlessly, I don't want to just give you the same answer. It's very easy to do that, but really, ultimately, there's many meditation techniques, and you can try out a range of them in the course of developing your practice. But ultimately, there's just one kind of meditation. There's just knowing your experience. Knowing the experience is an experience of dispassion. Investigate knowing, and dispassion will arise. It's not that you have to do it for 10 years and then suddenly all the dispassion will be there and all the passion will disappear. It's a very gradual process, and it starts as soon as you bring your awareness to the thing, to the passion at hand. As soon as you become aware, as soon as you pull out of the anger or the fear or the lust enough to see it, to know, I'm full of attraction for this thing I'm imagining or this person I'm imagining. If only I could have that ice cream cone. as soon as you see yourself feeling that and you become conscious of the thought, of the feeling, of the imagining, it starts to fade. That's dispassion arising. Just stay with it and be patient. If you lose patience, the next feeling will be, oh, if only it could be totally gone. That's very common in meditation, and that itself is a hindrance. Know it. Watch it, see what it feels like, investigate it. It will fade. And what will be left after that is sublime. Maybe I'll offer one more thought about that. My own take on, and this is partly a continuation of my answer to Gita, it's a reflection on Nibbana. So if you've spent any time looking at Buddhism at all, you've encountered the Four Noble Truths, which we can also translate the Four Noble Realities. And you know that the first reality that the Buddha indicates to us is a very skillful place to place our attention, is the reality of suffering. We've talked a lot about that already tonight. The word suffering is a translation of the Pali word dukkha. And actually, it's fallen a little bit out of favor in many secular lay circles and in scholarship on Buddhism and on the Pali Canon, because it covers a wider range of meaning than what suffering in English means. It's really anything on the spectrum of unpleasant, from the strong experiences that we usually mean when we say suffering to very, very, very subtle feelings of dissatisfaction. And actually, dissatisfaction, because any negative feeling, weak or strong, is not satisfactory, dissatisfaction is actually a more common translation nowadays for dukkha, at least in the secular world. So when I'm trying to think about what is nibbana, what is stillness, what is dispassion, I ask myself, okay, well, what is the opposite of dukkha? What is the opposite of dissatisfaction? And that's a really easy one, in English at least. The opposite of dissatisfaction is satisfaction. We've all experienced satisfaction, if only for brief moments. We've all experienced moments of contentment, just being content. Actually, in a sense, every time you achieve a desire, every time you get something that you want, before the dukkha starts, there is a moment, at least a moment, an instant, when you feel, I got it. Feels good. How does that feel? To be contented, to be satisfied with what you've got. So maybe now, I mentioned I was going to shift up the format a little bit. This is a good moment to do it. We're about an hour in. Think of something think of one of those moments in your life, some birthday party where you got some present that you really liked. Before you forgot about the present, or before you lost it, or before it was stolen, or before it turned into dukkha. But think about the moment when you got it and you treasured it and you were happy and appreciative. Just think about that now, and maybe even just close your eyes for a minute and imagine it. The Buddha taught explicitly to make much of contentment. So take that moment of satisfaction, hold it in your mind and in your heart. And now, imagine what it would be like to have that feeling in every moment. Moment after moment after moment after moment after moment. To have your lived experience be an experience of contentment. Simple, I got it, it's okay, this is enough. I'm satisfied. So there is something about nibbana which is imaginable, or which is unimaginable, which is like, it seems so exalted and lofty that we can't even imagine what it's like. But I think that the thing that I was just pointing to is equally unimaginable. Imagine what it would be like if you can to just be content ongoingly. Monks are enjoined to be content with little. That's a training to be content with nothing and with everything. This is tied up with Nibbana. What was the question this was in response to? Okay, so let's get back. Oh, we got a lot of questions coming in. I better move in here. Bhante, in the 12 links of dependent origination, which link would be easiest to break with observation and deep, wise contemplation? This is kind of a tricky one because the suttas point us to different ones. It's going to be different based on where you are in your practice and on your own intellectual bent and in your own temperament. The Four Noble Truths, which I think you've referred to before, point us towards tanha, craving. You look at craving with observation and deep, wise contemplation. That will do much for you in developing of the path. You'll have moments of breaking the link with suffering. Other teachings and teachers will point to suffering itself, to ignorance. Notice earlier one of our friends was talking about noticing the hindrances. A hindrance is a suffering. It is a manifestation of ignorance, a dhamma of the mind. Ultimately, at its root is tanha, but that's what puts it on the same wheel of dependent origination. One of my first teachers pointed to Vedana, the meditation on feeling, as a really important one and something really unique to the Buddha's teaching. By meditating on feeling, or more narrowly, sometimes in the lay world it's translated feeling tone, but I like the translation valence, the haze of pleasantness and unpleasantness around any particular moment. That is what gives rise to craving. So there's a link to really pay a lot of attention to. I'm pointing really to the four Satipatthana meditations, the foundations of mindfulness. It's not that one is easier. It's that different ones come forward in your practice. Different ones come forward in your life. And you notice which ones are more prominent. It is the noticing of what's prominent that allows you to, as you're putting it, break the link, to become aware, to cultivate dispassion. Okay, BDW follows up. The unaccumulated self. I think I heard from an English translation of the Venerable Swa Hua. I'm not as familiar with the Mahayana teachers. Maybe I can ask Bhante Sudaso about that. He studied the Mahayana teachings very deeply in Chinese Buddhism, Chan especially. You can come back to a monk chat and ask him yourself about the unaccumulated self. And maybe I will too, because I'm curious. BDW continues. I think he was talking about anatta, but much of the suttas were translated into Chinese using the Taoist lexicon. So I'm not sure of the origin of the translation unaccumulated self. Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. We'll investigate. Again, Bhante Sudasa, the abbot here at Empty Cloud, who will be back soon on Monk Chat, can probably answer your question. Yeah, so we just had a conversation about anatta. Let me not delve further into it this time. Dukkha, unsatisfactory states of being, another mark of existence. Anatta, anicca, dukkha. What are the factors that lead to Jannah? Okay, so the factors that lead to Jannah. People really like the sound of Jannah. It sounds like something you just want if you're a meditator. One factor that does not lead to jhana is that wanting. I would say that the most important factor, and I'm using your word, which is a very good choice here, a quality that gives rise to. A factor is a causal quality, a quality that makes something happen or contributes to something happening. I would say that probably the most prominent one that you can cultivate most directly is your sense of integrity through refining sila, refining your ethical conduct in the realm of words, deeds, and thoughts. Then, in meditation, bring your sila to mind. Reflect on what you've done since the last time you meditated. That was good. It doesn't have to have been like great. You don't have to have saved a life or run into a burning building to rescue the infant in its cradle. Just think of any decisions that you made, large or small, that you made for the right reasons, that you can stand behind and feel proud of. We make these decisions every day. From the moment we wake up, like, oh, I don't want to get up. No, I'm going to get up. I got to go to work. Well, maybe you didn't make it for a good reason. Maybe you made the decision for the wrong reason, but keep looking forward, move through your day in your mind and find where you can hang your hat. Find the acts of body, speech, and mind that you feel good about. Reflect on your integrity as you develop your integrity. And the Buddha teaches us a feeling of tranquility will arise. Pleasure will arise, actually, a feeling of pamoja, gladness. You'll be glad. It's a kind of mudita for yourself. And out of that gladness, tranquility arises. And this is the beginning of, these are the foundations for jhana. The proximate cause, the thing that actually lets the mind come together in what we call jhana, is seclusion from the hindrances. It sounds like a mouthful, but it means what it says: seclusion, being apart from those defiled mental states that typically distract us. And this is a synonym for mindfulness. It's a steady, sustained, peaceful resting in which the hindrances are still there, but you're not lost in them. You're seeing them. They're like whispers in the mind. And by hindrances here, I'm talking about not the general idea, but the specific things, the thoughts in your mind, the intentions that aren't related to what you're doing. They get very, very quiet. And out of that, the mind can come together. I hope that's helpful. Feel free to ask follow-up questions for a little while more. Got some more questions. Danilo, that satisfaction feels like love. Oh, absolutely. It also has a similar feeling to metta. Well, metta is love. It's the good kind. It's the selfless aspect of what we mean by the word love. Even the most worldly love often has some little hint of metta. And pure metta is not about oneself at all, but it's love. Actually, a really wonderful scholar who I have the privilege of knowing personally, Maria Heim, wrote a book on the traditional understanding of metta, actually of what are known as the Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. Selfless love, or loving kindness, as it's usually called nowadays, compassion, altruistic happiness for others or gladness, and equanimity, in which she called all of these qualities the Buddha's spectrum of love, that they're all manifestations of and flavors or varieties of love. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah. That metta is a slightly different pitch, but very similar. Yes, indeed. Yes, Bhante, I too have heard feeling and craving and ignorance. Thank you. Thanks very much. All right, well, I have now caught up to the end of the live chat. Please feel free to enter any more questions. I'm going to try one more time to recapture, frustratingly, what I lost earlier in the talk, which was the third mark of self, not the third characteristic, but I was asked about anatta, not self, and I started to answer by talking about the feelings that constitute self. There's a traditional phrase that we're enjoying to take up in meditation. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. They refer to the three flavor feelings of possession, identification, and conceit. Mana is the Pali concept. Mana, conceit, is not what is usually meant in English by the word conceit, although that's one of its flavors, the feeling of superiority, of being better than others. It's also the feeling of being worse than others. It's also the feeling of being the equal of others. All three of those feelings include the sense of I. They are the sense of I in a sense, that there is no more to it than conceit, identification, and possession. So that's just the end of that answer that I gave earlier. We've got a few more comments have come in. You're very welcome, BDW. Ethan says, Bhante, any thoughts on healthy boundaries for Buddhists, like balancing kindness or compassion towards others while not being taken advantage of? Recognizing the distinction is the boundary, Ethan. That is the boundary, is recognizing it. It's not kindness. It's not compassion for others to let yourself being taken advantage of to the extent that it harms you. We're taught, I was just talking about this sutta in the past couple of days on the live stream. We're taught in the Buddha's advice to his son that we should consider our actions, including actions like giving somebody something, in view of the question, is this beneficial for this person? Is it beneficial for me? Is it beneficial for both this person and me? You want to be able to say yes to those questions. And here, beneficial doesn't mean in the sense of like, am I going to get something out of it? It means, is it wholesome? What is the intention here? Of course, part of your intention in the kind of action you're trying to protect yourself from is kindness. But you want to be careful of blended intentions. There's also the intention, along with going too far, perhaps, of submission to someone else's greed or to someone else's, I don't want to say malice because it's typically not going to be something so strong, to somebody else's greedy suffering. Somebody's hurting so badly that they're willing to take more than they know they should ask. But if somebody doesn't, if you're helping, if it's just because it's difficult to give someone something, doesn't mean it's not wholesome. It can well be that a person doesn't even, the person might be unconscious on the ground and their intention isn't involved at all, and you still might feel some aversion. The kindness is to, if you have the strength, to help them. You have to look at your intention really closely and develop a felt sense of conscience with an N. That's your boundary. Boundary between balance. The balance is a boundary. It's a synonym. Yeah, you say it really well. Kindness or compassion while not being taken advantage of. Okay. Any other questions coming in? You're very welcome, Ethan. It's a good question. You answered it yourself. Those are the best questions. Cows are friends. I think you might have meant. Wonderful. Welcome. I've been developing metta, but get the impression it is sometimes looked down on and that other meditation might be more fruitful. Any thoughts on that? Yes, this is a very interesting topic. I do have thoughts on that. They're not actually my own thoughts, but I buy into them all the way. I am a fan of the secular scholarship on Buddhism. I think it's really helpful to look at the Dhamma of the Buddha from any intelligent perspective. There's always something we can learn from different perspectives. It is indeed the case that in some suttas, it seems like, and in fact it is, if you're really honest, if you do an honest reading, it seems like metta and the other Brahma Viharas are very much like respected. They're ranked high, but they're not the highest. They're below Nibbana. That if you manage to radiate the divine abidings well enough, they will bring you to as high as the Brahma world, to the very, very most refined states short of Nibbana. My sense is that this is a kind of excess of the tendency down the ages of scholar monks, scholastics, who are investigating the Dhamma, the written Dhamma, the suttas at the philosophical level, to want to get things organized, to want to systematize and categorize the different concepts that they can find in order to understand them better, for sure. But in doing so, it's possible to lose the nuance of what was actually being taught. And my reason for thinking this is based on the work of one particular scholar I mentioned before, Richard Gombrich, who did some research in which he performed a very, very close reading of the Te-Vidya Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, in which the Buddha, this is the Sutta of three knowledges, Te-Vidya, in which he talked to two Brahmin students about the Brahma Viharas, about cultivating metta. And in this sutta, if you delve into it, it's quite clear that he's talking about achieving complete liberation through the cultivation of the Brahma Viharas. So in one case, in one sutta, we see that the path of the Brahma Viharas can be a complete path, a path all the way to complete enlightenment. And in other suttas, we see there's this progression of refined states that lead you ultimately beyond even perfect love. What's the real experience? Well, my advice would be just cultivate it. Cultivate it as far as you can, and you'll know. It is interesting if you compare, I'm going to mention two specific suttas where in one, the jhanas lead to, there's the enjoyment, the encouragement to cultivate the jhanas, and after that, you will be elevated to the point where you can perfect wisdom. And there's another where you're encouraged to cultivate the Brahma Viharas to the point where you can, where you'll become enlightened. I'm sorry, the first one, jhanas, wisdom, enlightenment. The second one, it's Brahma Viharas, enlightenment. And these are the Anapanasati Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, the sutta on the mindfulness of breathing, wonderful sutta, and the one right after it, which is the Kayagata Sutta. Kayagata Sati Sutta, the mindfulness of the body. The variations are very interesting. I encourage you to take a look. So yeah, no, my impression is that yes, they are, the Brahmaviharas are sometimes subordinated to Vipassana and Samatha meditation, but in other places they're not, and in your own experience, they certainly do not have to be. If you can cultivate the Brahma Viharas, Metta, and you can cultivate Satipanya to the point that you can answer this question, you're all set. You don't have to worry about whether one is a little bit better than the other. Okay. Would Gita Ratnayake, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, would Samma Sankampa include the Brahma Vihara? So right intention. Well, Brahma Vihara certainly is a flavor of intention. Yeah, the intention of non-ill will is often considered and understood to be a synonym for metta. The answer is yes. It would include Brahma Vihara. So we have the right intentions of renunciation, of non-ill will, of non-harming. And again, non-ill will is the same. It's the flip side of that right intention. Yes is the answer. Okay. WWW. Hi, I am Chinese and now studying in Germany. Was studying Lam Ring Chenmo, a book of Gelug, which I believe is Tibetan Buddhism. It's the first time I saw such a live broadcast. I'm very curious. Just want to say hi. Well, hi. I hope you've been with us. It was a nice conversation, which we're in the last phase of. Welcome. Feel free to enter any questions you might have. Okay, and indeed, Elaine is saying goodnight, and we're starting to wind down. Any final questions? We'll wrap it up for the evening. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have so much interaction with our lay community this week. You probably won't be seeing me directly in the live stream, but I will certainly be in the room next week, and it's nice to have a sense of community from this perspective. So maybe we can wrap things up here, and I'll wish you all a wonderful evening. Why don't we end with 3 sadhus? We started more informally tonight, but we talked a lot about the Dhamma, so that's appropriate. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Wish you a good evening.